What's up, wackadoos? Welcome back. We're still working on the truck, but we're starting to make some real headway. Now we're getting to some of the fun stuff, and I want to show you guys what I've already done. I did a little bit off camera, and I want to show you what I did. But first, this episode is proudly sponsored by Reviva-Gear, who was nice enough to supply us with this brand new Cherry plasma cutter. So this is going to be a huge help for a lot of the sheet metal that we've got coming up, and a few other projects that we got lined up after that. So I can see this getting a lot of use in the near future, and with its integrated air pump, it makes this thing really convenient to use because I'm not having to use my currently broken air compressor. So this is going to work out really well. Let's try and put it to work today. So I'm going to start with what I got done since the last video, which hasn't been a whole lot, but let's show you. I went ahead and I primered up this other bedside box, and it looks really nice. It all looks nice and uniform. Obviously, we need to put sheet metal over everything, and you might think, why is he primering all this stuff? The truck's going to be in primer for a very long time. So having everything blacked out for me is like a really big morale boost, just because it makes it all look uniform and nice. So that's why I'm doing it. So don't judge me. I like it. I also got this box and was able to get it installed. Now I had to beat the snot out of that corner, and frankly the inside of the box looks horrible. And I'll deal with that a little bit later. But now there's another storage on this side, and it is lockable and closes up, as well as both of our fuel tanks. So I think today we're going to start working on trying to put some sheet metal over some other stuff. So we'll start making some templates, and let's see if we can't cut some sheet metal. So we're going to start by trying to put in some sheet metal over our fuel area. Now obviously I haven't really done anything with the fuel necks, and that's because I needed to know what the depth was going to look like and how I could get the hoses run through. That's its own problem. So what I think I'm going to do is, I know that we're a little out of square, and we did that to match the body lines of the truck on the front corner. So I'm going to butt up to that. I'm going to try and use the new plasma along with a guide to try and cut it off flush so we can slide it up forward, get it nice and tight, and then hopefully I'll be able to just trace the edge with the plasma and that piece will be done. But we'll see if it's as easy as it sounds. So I marked out where I need to make my cut. Give it a whirl with the new plasma. Seemed to work pretty good to me. Now I'll buff down that edge and mock it up, and if it fits where it's supposed to, we can throw a couple holes in it to hold it up in place with some sheet metal screws. So I'm pretty pleased with that. Here's where it gets a little more complicated. It's about thinking about the step that comes after the step you're on, so you don't step on your own dick later. So I need my fuel neck, both of them, to go right around here in that corner somewhere. However, I've already determined, and if you've been with the channel a while, you know that there's going to be a set of exhaust stacks that come out of the bed when we put in the big motor. So once the big motor's in, it's going to have a regular exhaust, and it's going to have a cutout, and the cutouts are going to run to exhaust stacks out of the bed. But my fuel neck kind of have to go exactly where I want to put that exhaust through the bed. So I need to pop that off and start looking at where they're actually going to go on the sheet metal and how I can route them so I can still get away with running my exhaust through the bed, or if that's even going to be possible. After looking at the amount of space that I have underneath the front of the bed, it's going to be a bunch of extra work to try and make it so that I can route the exhaust through the bed. That being said, I'm a metal fabricator, and I don't think I could live with my conscience if I didn't have straight pipe 472 sounds coming out of this thing at some point. So I'm going to go ahead and add the extra work of figuring out what to do with the fuel necks now that the exhaust has got a spot to work. So let me show you how that sits. So this is going to be about the spacing that I have the stacks on the bed, and I'm going to have to work around them for several other projects. I plan on doing kind of a headache rack and a bunch of other stuff, but I really want to have that old school hot rod bed stacks look. So obviously I'm gonna have to try and find a way to route that hose more around this way instead up against the frame. And this one should be fine. We'll work with some heat shielding and stuff later, particularly since that's not going to be the standard exhaust. That'll be the uncork it for a cruise route or just to show off, have a good time pipes. So it's not going to be producing heat all the time. So that's all for later. For now, I got to try and get the fuel necks figured out so that I can punch the holes and get the sheet metal moving. So after some very janky plumbing, the wind has been starting to kick up and it's getting a little cold, so I don't know how much I'm going to get done. But obviously this is going to be our primary tank, and I got it marked out kind of where it's going to go. And then our secondary one, after some junctions and connections and the whole nine, goes up here, and it will have a little bit of a downhill angle on the filler neck. Now they're obviously not going to sit in the same plane. One will be a little higher than the other, and they're a little further apart than I would have liked. But that's kind of the price I'm willing to pay to have the exhaust stick out of the bed, because I want that more than I want symmetry on the fuel necks. Mostly because I'm very rarely going to be using the secondary tank. For 90% of the stuff I do, I'm going to be using the primary tank, especially with gas being $5 a gallon right now. So what do you expect? So I'm going to go ahead and get things marked out on the sheet metal here, and then hopefully get that tossed up there. So we managed to get our side piece all cut out, and our fuel doors are ready for installation. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm probably going to DA this and throw some primer on it and go ahead and stick it up here. And it's probably only going to get like 4 screws in it for now, because there's no point in doing a full installation knowing that that one's going to have to come back off. But I can use that border edge to start laying out the rest of my sheet metal. So it's a bunch of stuff I got to do under here. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do a temporary solution, which is just throw a couple of screws in the corners to keep this one up in place. But it is looking like rain, so I'm going to throw some primer on it. Oh, and I like looking at it when it's all blacked out. So we're going to do that first. I managed to get my panel all drilled out, and I got Clecos in place throughout the panel. So all this is going to be the permanent spacing, but we'll swap out to a more permanent hardware once this panel's ready to go. Obviously, we got our fuel doors in place, and they actually look a lot better than I thought, considering they're not technically at the same height. But that's my OCD. Doesn't matter. So that's going to come back off. We'll be able to hook everything back up. When I'm out here again next, we'll go ahead and butt up to that plate, and we'll start moving this way, which will get us to the wheel well probably. And I can go ahead and I can arc that out. I haven't figured out what my arc's going to be, but I'll probably put a bead roll on that as well. So there's a lot left to do. I'll catch you guys as soon as I'm out here again. So excitingly, I was able to pick up our transmission from the transmission shop after being rebuilt, along with this heavy-duty Allison stall converter to go along with it. Now, this is a BOP TH400 that's going to go behind our Cadillac big block. Now, if you guys are new to the channel or one of my friends that doesn't actually watch my videos, you can find out what that's all about right here. Otherwise, let me show you what that's all about, the real short version. So it goes without question that obviously the truck is going to be very heavy. So we need a better power plant than the very anemic 350 that's in it. And that's where this comes in. So this is a Cadillac 472 that's got a couple of hot rod parts in it. And it should make about 560 foot-pounds of torque. Now, with that transmission, should make this thing able to pull its own weight just fine. But now that I actually have the transmission, the stall converter, and the motor, I can start mating those things together and preparing them to go in the truck. Now, I don't know how long it's going to take for me to find all the parts and bibs and bobs to make it work, but at least we have the big, expensive part done. So now I can start accumulating all the little stuff. And there we have it. Our next piece of sheet metal is in place. So obviously we've got a little gap down here, which allows the edge of the door to come down. But we've got a pretty good tight gap all around. It doesn't stick down a whole lot. So I'm pretty pleased with that. And then obviously we've got the Clecos on this side, but we use some regular hardware here. So this is all going to be able to come back off if I need to for now. Eventually what I'd like to do is I'd like to go behind that seam and put a little seam sealer on it so that no water can get between the panels, which will create rust later with dirt. Now back here, I just marked out from the center of the rim, and I made a radius for what I was going to do on the wheel well. Now obviously it's kind of a tight fitment here, but I do have a little bit of a bulge out that I did with the bead roller to try and give it some room so the tire can swing without catching it. The other reason that I'm not too worried about it rubbing is this tire size is not correct. While all 4 tires on this truck are non-matching, the ones on this axle are particularly different. So it's actually about 1.5 to 2 inches taller than the inside tire. And I think that this outside tire is the one that's the most off from all the others. So I'm kind of thinking about the wheel gap for the inside tires, not necessarily this big balloon that I've got on the outside. And then once I cut in our rear section, I get this all cleaned up and prepped for sheet metal. I have my measurements so that I can go ahead and meet up the body line. And it adds a little bit of rigidity there so our sheet metal is not flapping in the wind around the wheel well. So I'm pretty excited. Okay, next day, and I've come up with my plan of attack. So here's what it boils down to. I can either start skinning on the driver's side from the axle forward, because everything from the axle forward is welded, or I could weld everything from the axle back and keep skinning this side. And personally, I want the satisfaction of seeing one whole side re-skinned, so I think I need to go ahead and weld everything up. That way I can go ahead and re-skin it, and I don't have to worry too much about what's underneath, and I know that it's structural. That way when I decide what's actually going to go back here, I can go ahead and remove those panels and add whatever needs to be added, but I'm not thinking about what I didn't do. So I think we're going to go ahead and spend the rest of the afternoon welding all this up, and maybe even a little bit of sheet metal. But we'll catch up with you when I've got all this welded.
2 hours later.
Ta-da! Alright, one more section to go tomorrow. And then one side's pretty much locked in. I kind of missed just a little bit with my radius there, so there's kind of a corner there. A little disappointed, but for doing it by hand, it's pretty good. But yeah, I'm happy with that. So it's starting to look like something from the outside of the truck. I'm pretty enthusiastic. Next day, let's get it. I gotta do this piece right here, and I gotta do this little piece right here up at the corner. And hopefully that'll wrap up this side. I'd like to get that done today. I'm just gonna jump right into it. And there you go. So there's our last section on this side to make it to the end. I'm pretty happy with that. There's a little bit of a flex there in the end of the rail. I might pound that flat later, but I'm not too worried about it right now. Now all I gotta do is try and get that last section here in the front, which is gonna be the closer for the end corner of the cab. And that should be pretty straightforward. That should basically just be a square panel. I haven't really decided how I'm gonna cut that yet. It depends on how much material I have left. So let me find something to make work here. All right, last section is in place. Scratched it with a little bit of drill there, but it's not the end of the world. So that means that this whole side has all the sheet metal cut for it. So everything's mounted, minus that one plate that we're gonna have to remove, that one panel, so we can go ahead and finish up the fuel system. I'm not too worried about that right now, since gas is $5.50 a gallon this morning, so we're gonna deal with that next week. For now, we're gonna go ahead and call it a night, but tomorrow I'll start making templates for the driver's side, and just start working my way to the back. I fast forward to the weekend, and I've actually made a bit of headway, and hopefully I'm going to be able to get this side all skinned out today. So I got the front section all done. That's all in place. Got this one all done. Still got to do my wheel arch and go ahead and bead roll that all out. Finish radius, putting the radius on some of the corners here. And I got one more section I got to make. Now, the main problem that I'm running into is my hardware selection. So I don't have quite the right perfect drill bit to make it so I can either drill in and then throw my hardware through it, and unfortunately I keep snapping off my self-tappers, and all my other drill bits just blow the hole out too big, and nothing's retained. So I'm gonna have to do something else with the hardware. For now, it's not too big a concern. I'm trying to just get this side wrapped up, catch up with you guys once I get these last couple sections in place. So there's our last 2 panels. We have sheet metal all the way to the back of the truck. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull each panel individually, hit them with the DA, smooth them out a little bit, and then go ahead and throw primer on them. When I get to these 2, I'm gonna go ahead and cut that section out, throw the bead roll on them, and then they're ready for reinstallation. So Pretty exciting. Still got a lot of work to do tonight, but I'll catch up with you guys once I go ahead and get that done. Hopefully, next chunk of video is this thing all blacked out and in one piece on this side. Well, that was vastly more frustrating than it should have been. I kept snapping off these screws because unfortunately the screws that I selected for doing the interior work and sheet metal stuff look really good and they worked out great for that thinner stuff, but going into that 1/4 inch framing, I snapped off a lot of them. And the only way to get them out was to drill them out and then try to replace them. So there's actually one hole in particular where I put in 3 different screws, snapped off all 3 while being gentle, and then ended up finally getting the 4th one to stick. But a lot of the holes are stripped out, several of them are drilled out, and it's just not going to continue to work that way. So I think I'm going to have to drill them out, tap them, and switch to a better hardware. That's all for later, and I won't make you guys watch all that. But I do like the look of the sheet metal with the little button heads, so I'll probably do something along that line. Anyway, now with our sheet metal mostly behind us, it's time to start focusing on some other projects that need to happen. So obviously, we got to do something with the top side of the bed. I'd like to recover this sheet metal with something else. I got to work on putting a winch in place, tie down points for a vehicle, and a few other things to try and make it more utilitarian, like a bunch of D-rings so that I can use it for other stuff other than just cars. And I'd really like to make provisions for some stake sides in case I want to do dump runs and things like that. So that'll be a lot of fun. I also have to start thinking about the headache rack. I'd like a headache rack that goes between the back of the cab and the bed to keep things from sliding forward, and it'll also give me a provision for where I'm going to hang emergency lighting and things of that nature. So kind of cool. The big one is that I have to work on the logistics for the ramps, which I have a couple of friends that might be able to help me with some 3D modeling so I can look at what the load is going to look like on these ramps so I can reinforce them appropriately to do what I want to do. But I have a really fun idea for how I'm going to be storing these ramps, and I'd really like you guys to check that out. So if you haven't subscribed already, I implore you to do so because there's going to be a lot more fun to come, and soon we're going to actually get the reward of all this work and be able to drive this thing. So please subscribe if you haven't already. I also want to take the opportunity to thank Reviva-Gear Central Oregon one more time for sending us this Cheery 40Z plasma cutter. It made this project so much faster, and we wasted a lot less consumables. Therefore, we wasted less money by having this piece of equipment. We did it faster and cheaper, and with less frustration. So once again, thank you very much, Reviva-Gear. But as for this week, I think that's it. Wackadoo out.